Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the CannaList Conversations. We are joined today by Joyce Gerber of Canna Moms. Joyce, how are you?
I'm great. I'm out here in Massachusetts. Oh, my feedback? Is that me? Oh, I'm out here in Massachusetts.
You're good?
All right, I'm out here in Massachusetts. Had a weirdly warm day yesterday, and I got up today, and I'm ready for the week to start.
So, Joyce, your background is you went to law school, and I'm assuming that meant you were a lawyer at some point in time. And here we are talking about cannabis. So, give me a little bit of the background of how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you. So when I actually begin my own story talking about this, I always say that cannabis is not my natural habitat. I am, if you could see me, I'm a white lady. I'm 56 years old. I've been married for almost 30 years. I have 2 kids in their 20s. I have
white
a lot
ladies who are in the cannabis space. It's not a problem.
I don't know. I am a lawyer by training. I used to practice family law. I was a divorce attorney. I play tennis. I wear pearls. I'm all of that. And I really did believe that cannabis was dangerous. So I came from that spot. And I had a Cannabis Awakening. That's how I kind of describe it. I went out to Colorado in 2016 with my husband, and we did a tour, just a private tour of the industry. I never had any plan on working on it. I just thought it'd be fun. But it was on that tour, we went to a dispensary, we went to a grow facility. The woman who ran the tour was named Goldie Soledar. She's got a business called City Sessions, and she just kind of gave us the history, like stuff I just didn't know about cannabis. So Harry Anslinger and why it's illegal and all of the things that I didn't understand. And I just knew that everything I knew about cannabis at that point was wrong. That was kind of my epiphany. So I came back to Massachusetts, which is important because that comes up later. My kids were teenagers. We were like, kids, everything we know about cannabis is wrong. They were like, yes.
You love to hear that from mom, right?
They're like, what happened in Denver?
Right. Oh, it's some trip.
And then in the fall of 2016, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the people of the Commonwealth, we voted to approve adult use. We were the first state in New England, really. And then at the end of that year, a contract position I was working on ended. And then in 2017, I literally became like another invisible middle-aged woman. So although I worked, I was in and out of monetized work for the most of my kids' lives, the truth is my husband just made more money and had better health insurance. So when anything happened with the kids, I would drop out. Like I would be the person who would take the nick. Anyway, so by 2017, I have this crazy resume because I was that mom who like ran the PTA and did everything. I also did do divorce work, and it was kind of like in and out. I volunteered at a library. I worked at a factory. I mean, I had a really random assortment of skills, none of which seemed to be monetizable. That's what the world kept telling me. And I kept meeting other women like myself. So I'm 56. I'm like the beginning of a generation. We were just told to do everything, and we did. Like I took the bar pregnant, and I was not even the only one. And then Sheryl Sandberg kept telling us to lean in more. And I'm like, where are we supposed to lean into? And so, so 2017, I'm in this world. I'm like, there are all these women just like me. It's like an army of us, like really overeducated, impactful women who dared to take time off to care for their kids. And like, we're literally being punished. Anyway, so I'm an advocate by nature, and I started getting very passionate about this. And my husband was like, you're making a profession out of not having a job. You need to figure out what's going on. So I go into career therapy, and, we do like professional testing. And she's like, you really couldn't have designed a job that was worse for you than family law attorney. And I was like, yeah, I sucked at it. I hated it. But I could see that law firms were literally starting to set up cannabis divisions. And that's how I thought of this. This is what I thought I would first do. So I asked her, what do you think of cannabis? And she was like, that's a great idea. And that's kind of how the journey started. And in 2017 to 2018, I just started learning about it. Like I heard the word endocannabinoid system, and I started going to women grow events. And the joke is I went into this for money. This was really supposed to be a career that was supposed to make me money, but I'd become an advocate. And sort of along this journey, I started meeting all these women who were like love and justice, goodness and hope, and like there's plant, and there was just a world that is not like law. And then in 2018, I met a man who wanted to start a podcast media company. He had a podcast already, and he hired me to be his executive producer. So that's how it started. So for a year, that's what I did. And I was just bringing people on to the show, and I could see how big this industry was. Like, everyone, my mother thought I was like in a drug cartel. Like my brother was worried about me. Like nobody knew what I was doing. And I'm like, this industry is huge. It's going to change the world. Like I was kind of seeing it from the inside. And then in 2018, I was in the studio, and a friend of mine and I were just talking about how you talk to your kids in this new era. And I don't know, the guys in the studio were like, I don't know who's going to be interested in that. And my friend was a little bit hesitant because people don't necessarily want to be connected to cannabis. And they wanted to call me the Canna Mom, which at the time was ridiculous because I could, first of all, I wasn't. But the other thing is, I could see like the moms, this is what I was starting to see. These moms who were really brave, who were using cannabis to heal themselves at the risk of losing their children, or using cannabis to heal their children at the risk of something even bigger, because I could see how it was helping, and they'd become desperate. And those women were really the advocates in the forefront, like advocating for this as a medicine, like Charlotte's Web and all those, those stories. So I called it the Canna Mom Show, like an interview show, like the Daily Show. And that's how it started. So I was in the studio. I stayed with the media company through that fall. And then in the fall, my friend Amy and I decided we want to take it on our own. We're like Thelma and Louise. So I left the media company and I just started again. That was 2019. The whole idea was to monetize this. And we found a place to record. We got a hosting site. I kind of learned about cannabis and podcasting simultaneously. So we're going through this, and I trademarked the name. I'm a lawyer, so I did all the stuff right. I set up as a business, but I couldn't get a bank account. Like I literally couldn't get a checking account because I intentionally trademarked the Canna Mom Show. So I understood Canna was a problem because I'd already been in the industry. I could see how banks are treating us, but I don't touch the product. I don't sell the product. I don't do anything. I'm just like, I'm a podcast, and I couldn't get a bank account at a big bank. So that was from September until March of 2020. That crazy? And this is part of the industry, Anyway, so March of 2020, I finally get a small credit union in Massachusetts agrees to open up a checking account with a low fee. Everyone was like happy for me, like I had a baby. I go out there, I open up the checking account, and that was the week that the world shut down. So I set it up, and then my daughter, who's out of state, and my son was out of the country, were calling me, and they're like, I think we have to come home. And then that was the week in the pandemic, really everything just shut down. And I used to go into a studio in Westwood, Mass called Pod 617. That's where I actually create the show. And that Monday or Tuesday, I had a show, but I didn't know what to do because we couldn't leave the house. And my son, who's a musician, was home because he'd been evacuated. And he had a mic and he had everything at the house already. So this is my daughter's bedroom. So we set up the podcast studio in my daughter's bedroom, and that was season 1. And we did 50 shows, like nobody canceled, and we just kept going. Like it was kind of like a hot mess, but we just put a show out every week. And that's how it started. And, now I'm in season 3. My co-host Amy decided she couldn't do it after season 1. Season 2 was great. We decided we tried to get, we put our marketing plan together. We're like a sort of a sponsored show, season 2, and now we're in season 3, and we're a fully sponsored podcast and sharing the stories of women from around the country and across the world. Really, it's amazing.
And what's your mission?
Our mission is to enhance the impact women have as leaders and business professionals and healthcare advocates and policymakers and caregivers and moms, because we're sharing their stories and we're preserving these stories, that are going to go away at some point. This is going to be normalized. And they're really hopeful. They're love and kindness, wisdom, hope, like stuff I never say in the law. And again, I'm a niche little podcast in a really growing industry, but I really do believe there's an opportunity to do something different. And I talk about cannabis as a vehicle, kind of like podcasting as a vehicle, to do something different. And I keep meeting these women in the industry who are so passionate about this plant and so passionate about, talking about health and wellness and caring with this plant because they've been healed or healed someone they love. And they're going to stay in this crazy industry, which you can't get a checking account in, and the payment processor will shut you down, and you can't deduct normal business expenses. And it's technically illegal federally, so you can get in a lot of trouble. I mean, it's a crazy industry. And the truth is America is falling behind, I think.
And so in supporting these women, are you facing, or have you faced, or have these women faced the sort of Canna bro mentality?
Oh, yeah. So Jennifer Wetzel, she's out of Maine. She just put out a study, the Women in Cannabis study. And it's not any different than any other industry, but we're trying to find a baseline. So again, I'm an attorney. I was a family law attorney. I was often the only female in a room. I know what it meant to compete and not collaborate. That was sort of how we were functioning. And it's not healthy. And it made me, and the truth is, I really feel like my generation, we're exceptional. Like we did stuff that women were not supposed to be able to do, and we did it. And it was sort of normalized, which is why it's so hard. Like there's nobody to care for our kids, and we're also excelling at work. So I think we're a really interesting generation that we're conscious of what's going on. Jennifer Wetzel put together the study, sort of a baseline, and we can start talking about collaborating instead of isolating ourselves, because you shouldn't be the only woman. And I talk about building a new world. And it's like the world that the structures that exist just didn't want us. So there's an opportunity to do something new. I mean, everyone's welcome to join us, but maybe we can do something different and create business structures that look a little bit different and are more like the plant. The plant's a caregiver. This industry should be built in her image. That is what I think.
And so were you able to build a community online during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Clubhouse was really a weirdly great opportunity. And I am connected to quite a few women's organizations that did a lot of online events. And I mean, I'm not sure what would have happened if COVID hadn't happened. I don't know if I would have done a second season. I don't really know what would have happened, but I was able to create these connections, and it's been really powerful.
And will you stay online, or will you go back to in person?
I am. So I'm actually, there's a big event in Boston called NECAN, March 18th to the 20th. The podcast was nominated as one of the best podcasts in cannabis. So we're up for a community award. So I am planning on going to the that event all 3 days, and I'm speaking that Sunday. And we are also, my podcast, for hosting an event in April we're calling a High Tea, South Boston, for Canna curious women to come and talk to me. We're going to have a healthcare professional. We have a woman who's a cannabis infused baker who's trying to open up a bakery out here, a tax consultant who works specifically with cannabis, a marketer, because this industry is very specialized. And I just want to elevate the women who are creating their businesses.
And what differentiates women in the business from the men?
I mean, I'll say sort of my general experience, just like anything, is that this is all about capital. It's all about money. And because it's so obvious, like I'd spoken about, it's very hard to get banking. It's very hard to get resources. So unless you have your own private resources, it's very hard to get into this industry. So men, venture capitals, people who already have money, the structures are built so they already have money, are getting into this to make money. And some of them are failing. Some of them are doing okay. I use Mad Men as a ridiculous example of like just coming into this industry thinking you're going to make mad money and doing it like you've always done. And the women are really, I'm telling you, they're coming in for health and wellness. And this is a really hard industry to be in. And that is what fuels them every day to keep them going, because I know how difficult it is. And they just continue because they've healed themselves. They're like evangelized. It feels different.
And what is the cannabis community like in Massachusetts?
So we're the first in New England. I do feel like I used to know more people, but I haven't been outside in a while. I think maybe we're a little bit more conservative in some ways than the West Coast. So again, I did not grow up in a cannabis community. I did not consume when my children were little. I actually feel bad about that now. I think I would have been a better mom. I was very stressed out. I could drink, but I couldn't smoke. You know what I mean? And or consume. But the women on the West Coast seem to, like, a lot of them really grew up in cannabis friendly families, or it was like a very different culture out there just to begin with.
Yeah.
I know they're like, they're talking about, I mean, California is an enormous state and they have a lot of other issues. But there are other people out in Humboldt County who kept this industry going for the past 100 years, underground. And that's a whole nother culture than the business bro who's just coming in to make money, or, whatever it is. And I am meeting more women who are trying to set up sort of female friendly dispensaries, because they're still sort of bro oriented. And women my age and older, we need this the most, and we have money. So you should be catering to us. That's what I don't understand. And dispensaries still aren't quite there yet, I think.
Despite having money, there's a stigma attached. And how does the mom in the community, like, does she want people to know that she's consuming product?
So I think this is changing, and I think this has changed over the pandemic too, because people are home and moms had to deal with so much. so much. And I will say my own personal story is, so when I knew my kids were coming home, I did not know cannabis would be an essential item. Before they showed up, I was running around town getting like tinctures and salves and flour and all sorts of things to, like, you know, keep us calm, as opposed to running around getting alcohol or toilet paper, which is what we probably needed. And
You know, actually, there's plenty available, but despite the hype, right?
but the thing is, we didn't really drink together. We did consume together because they're, you know, they're older now, they're in college, and we were really nice to each other. And I can see how I would much rather be in lockdown with a stoner than a drinker, really. And I think a lot of moms had that epiphany too, because it was so stressful. And the thing about being a mom is you have to be engaged with your kids' world. And it's very hard to do that when you have 10,000 other things spinning around in your head. It's hard to get down and be with them because that's what they need from you. And cannabis can help moms do that. And they are starting to appreciate that. So the mom groups I talk to, and I do talk to a lot of mom groups online, there is so much stigma. A lot of it is we talk through, why do you have stigma? Like, people don't even know where the stigma came from. You know, it was created. So it's a story, you know. And then talking about the health and wellness benefits, talking about it as a, you know, this is a science, not a belief system. And that we have an endocannabinoid system that works with cannabinoids, with plant medicine. So again, I'm very kind of Western medicine oriented. I'm, you know, I identify as an entitled white lady. I don't usually manifest anything, but the cannabis world has allowed me to sort of see that, you know, we have to think of things with more balance. And that although cannabis doesn't solve all problems, it shouldn't be the medication of last resort anymore. And that's sort of reducing the stigma. Do you know what I mean? The moms who are using it as medicine and they're very open and their kids know about it, that changes the next generation, because the mom isn't in the bathroom like doing whatever she's doing and then spraying herself with perfume and trying to hide it. You know, it's integrated into their lives. Like, mommy can have a glass of wine, you know. So I can see the moms who are very open are changing the perspective of their kids. You know, it's a micro macro level. They're changing the perspective of their spouse. And then it kind of like works out, because when you can see someone you love has been healed by this, which is a story I hear over and over again, it opens up your eyes to like maybe what you thought was wrong, and it opens you up to learning something new. So that transparency is so important for moms who are using this to help them be better moms.
And do you think that this is a separate market, or like, is there a place for this within sort of the general community, or do you need to carve out a space that is, you know, dedicated to women and their special needs?
I mean, I don't even know, talk about women. I do talk about women, but it's like this caregiving, this idea that, you know, we need to care for ourselves in order to heal others. It's a different mentality. So I don't know if we need a separate space, but just the idea that it isn't just, I don't like adult use in medical. I don't like the distinction really so much. I like therapeutic. I kind of talk about it that way because everyone's using it to make them feel a little bit more balanced, or to take away an anxiety, or to take away some pain. I don't know if it's a special space, but just to talk about it differently, maybe, because again, men and women, we all have the same things going on with us. But if we kind of live in this bro mentality of like highest THC and it's going to get you messed up, and that is not what cannabis is. That's really not how we talk about it. You know, we're talking about it to make us feel better so that we can be better people and better caregivers.
You know, what we're seeing as this becomes more acceptable and more readily available is we're starting to transition and move into brands. So will there be brands around women?
Oh, there already are. They're definitely out in California. There are definitely brands that focus on women. You know, some of it is the pretty packaging. Some of it is about effects. I mean, again, it's like specific products, talking about suppositories for pain. That's an awesome way to use it as a therapeutic method. We don't talk about it so much in dispensaries, but I definitely know many women who are trying to get this involved with CBD and THC in the suppositories. That's very specific for pain that women are just given medication for over and over again, which is sort of like the story I hear a lot. Women who had like one issue, so they got one medication, and then that medication caused something, so they got a second medication to impact the, you know what it is, and then you get up on a regimen, and women are finding cannabis can solve a lot of those problems. They can take away some of the pain, they can take away the anxiety, and they can reduce whatever the other medications they're taking.
And do they have to find this out for themselves? Because my sense is the medical community hasn't caught up to this and isn't ready to embrace this yet.
This is the most amazing part of the whole story. I mean, these women use themselves as guinea pigs. Do you know what I mean? Because again, Western medicine is take a pill, this is one dosage, and that's supposed to help everybody. I don't quite understand that. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. But cannabis is intentional. It's really weirdly intentional in a way that I am not familiar with growing up, but I'm learning how to do this, being very aware of your own body, because there's so many ways to consume cannabis. You can use it as a salve on your hand. You can use it as a tincture inside. You can consume it by smoking or edibles, lots of different ways. So being just very conscious on how you consume, and these women are doing it on their own. They're keeping notebooks and they're writing down strains. And there are nurses now. There's a Cannabis Nurse Association and the nurses are talking to each other. So that's a really good resource. But again, we're looking for data. Like, we need data. So I do know there are more organizations out there that are trying to collect, what's actually working for people, because these strains, the flower specifically, it's very tricky because it's not just the THC or the CBD, or it's the terpenes, and there's so many issues to this. So there's a lot. There's like, once you start unpeeling the layers of the onion, there's just a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, people are using their own bodies and trying to figure this out because they don't have there just aren't enough medical professionals, and doctors don't learn about this. So they'll dismiss it. For some women I talk to, sometimes their doctors will dismiss it. Sometimes they're willing to hear them out, but they can't advise them because they don't know how this works. And again, doctors don't necessarily understand how it interacts with pharmaceuticals, which is a big issue. So again, it's hard to prescribe something if you're not really sure how it's interacting with the other things that you kind of understand. So this is a big learning curve for a lot of people in a lot of ways. But I know a woman up in Canada. She's a pediatrician whose child had epileptic seizures, and the whole thing. She went down the rabbit hole, ended up on cannabis, and now she's using that to help her child. She's setting up a cannabis pediatric clinic in Canada.
And where, can you talk a little bit about, is there a crossover with the women's community and the people of color community and sort of their needs?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a huge social equity issue. I'm peeling the layers of the onion. Basically the war on drugs was to, suppress minorities. So we're kind of undoing this idea of what this plant is. So we talk a lot about social equity. It's like we're putting it in a side, but it's not an aside. It's like everything. I say cannabis touches everything from criminal justice to cosmetics. And if you want to talk specifically about social equity in terms of business, there's one like Lane, but you're also talking about social equity in terms of like criminal justice. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of organizations out there now, the Last Prisoners Project, I can't think of some people's name, but they're doing this work to get people who are convicted just because of a cannabis conviction out of jail. That's a huge social equity issue, and just how it's perceived in communities. And just going back, you have to think about, like, if you are the community that's been oppressed by this for so many years, and you're going to your elders in church and you're saying, I want to bring a cannabis dispensary into the neighborhood. It's going to be great. It's going to heal you. Do you know how hard that is to hear? I mean, so that's really a battle that these communities are fighting up against. So I can see it in Boston. We have a very specific situation of like racism and segregation in Boston. We literally redlined entire neighborhoods and said, that's where people of color can live. And now we're trying to reverse this a little bit with opening up dispensaries in these neighborhoods to bring resources, to bring money, and to create generational wealth. And it's a little bit of a hard sell for people to believe that this is going to be good after all the years of what happened to their neighborhood and what happened to their children. So I do. Yeah. No, it's such a big issue. Like, people talk about social equity like it's just business, like just getting business dispensaries up or whatever. But it's the whole thing. It's like the whole system is unequal. So I don't know, where do you start? But there's so many different ways to approach this. Whatever it is you do, which is sort of my message to people, whatever it is you do in this world, cannabis needs you to do the thing that you do to make this business help us. It's a vehicle to make things better. I really believe that.
And how do you keep that mentality, and how do you keep that, that approach when we're already beginning to see, big cannabis and pharma encroach upon this?
I can't control that. I mean, the truth is I can worry about it, but I can't control it. So what I can control is using my little butterfly wings and talking to women every day and empowering each other and talking about how great and awesome we are and how we can do this. And we don't, we can do this. We exist. And maybe it will work, maybe it won't work. I don't know. I've never done this before. I've never tried to build an industry. But, and it's not just the dispensaries. If we look at farming, like the hemp, like we could transform our entire carbon industry from carbon to cannabis, if we put the infrastructures in and we supported farmers and we made it a commodity and we allowed banks to actually do this the correct way, policy is huge. This is a huge part of this, getting this right, which we may or may not at this point, because we've never, I'm a lawyer, so we've never done this backwards. Like, this is really backwards. Each state is creating their own policies and their own laws, and they're kind of setting up these worlds without any federal, almost like a rack, just like a bracket to keep us in. Like, we don't have anything yet. So I am talking to people, doing cannabis federal policy regulations. You don't want it to be just the big business guys whispering the ears of the politicians. That's the scary part.
Because that's the money controlling the politics, right?
Yeah, which, anyway, so we got here through government. A lot of like problems we have now are created through government. We could maybe set up structures that allow each of us to hang our hangers on that make more sense. And again, it's a lot of it is about capital. I mean, I don't know how you fix that problem, but it's always been about capital. And I don't know what the answer to that is, except maybe collectively, like women talk about making more collective funding resources available, which I think that is happening. I know there's an organization called ArcView, which is working with it's a women's group within a bigger funding organization. I talked to, smaller business women who are trying to do some sort of collective to get people, startup money, but, it's hard to compete.
I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, and one of the, the opportunities, I think, is that, the ecosystem within cannabis is so huge, and there are so many opportunities because, not only do we have the front end dispensaries and the growers, but we have lawyers, we have tax accountants, branding people, digital marketing, the whole route, all of which, women can participate in, obviously, and are participating. So there's opportunities all across the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
But clearly there needs to be some grassroots efforts to protect from, just being encroached upon by the big players who are only money players.
I think, again, I like politics and religion, bring them all on. I live in Massachusetts. I am very involved with my local politicians. Maura Healey was my classmate at Northeastern University, and she's now running to be governor of, Massachusetts. There's like so many women at the top of the tickets now, which is pretty impressive, but who's whispering in their ears? The policy stuff is so important. So I know it's scary. People don't want to be involved at this level, but I can, this is where you're going to make an impact. Talking to people, sharing your story, being transparent, and letting people know what this is, because the truth is we are all ruled by stories. Like, a lot of this is just a bad story that was created to scare us. And we can prove that the story is wrong. We're dismantling the structures of it at every level. Moms are doing this across the board because they don't want to be sick. We don't want to be sick anymore. And I used to say this a lot. I just got kind of used to like just not feeling good all the time. Like, I just figured it was a thing. I had a lot of stress. I had kids. I was married. I was doing divorce work. This is just how I was going to feel forever. And cannabis really, honest to God, changed that. And I was like, what? I don't feel bad all the time and I can still get stuff done.
What has been the biggest surprise for you having this platform, this podcast platform? What has been most surprising to you?
Just how nice the ladies are. I was in the world of law. We aren't particularly nice to each other. I mean, the meaner you are, the better you do, which is sort of why I was so bad at it, because I could never be the meanest person in the room, the truth. But these ladies are really supportive, and all those things that I was told weren't good about me, all that weren't valuable in the law, like vulnerability, my willingness to admit that I don't know something, asking lots of questions because I really didn't know, were all made to look like I was like I wasn't a competent attorney. I mean, that was sort of like the world I lived in, and the more structures I had up to protect me, the better I did at my job, which is really unhealthy. And in the cannabis world, these ladies, we talk about stuff, they're very open, but they are real business people, and they are real farmers, and they are real doctors, and they do this in a different way that values what I own. And I just find that so comforting. It's transformative, really.
And does your audience, does it mirror you, or is there a cross section? What does it look like?
So I do think I appeal to some younger people just because I have children in their 20s and I've had their friends all know me. So I do have quite a younger audience too, but I do think it's like women, moms and caregivers my age, younger, a little bit older, who are looking for these stories. A lot of industry people listen just because they're looking for something interesting to hear. I'm all over the country. I'm actually have listeners all around the world. It's kind of cool. You can see on these podcasts where people are, where they're listening. And I can't specifically give you demographics, so they don't give you that, but I'm, moms and caregivers who are looking for something a little bit different and are looking for stories to validate. Like a lot of these women, like they were using this product on their body and they felt better, but the world was telling them, like the message from outside is that it was dangerous. And that's a very hard message to ignore, but they were able to do it usually because they were desperate. So I want women to know that this shouldn't be something, a last resort. There is literally nothing shameful about it. Nothing shameful about it. It's a plant. And that if we are healing ourselves, if we're going to heal this planet, the world, we have to heal ourselves first. And this is really important. This should be part of your opportunities: exercise, meditation, eating right, and cannabis can be part of that whole package of just making us feel well, because we have a lot to offer. We're going to, we're here. My generation, we're here. They think we're invisible, but we exist, so keep ourselves healthy so we can do what we need to do.
And, you're in your third year. Where do you think this will go? Where's coming up in the next year for you?
So I'm actually, this year I'm doing a crowdfunding event to support season 4. So I know I'm having a season 4. The crowdfunding event is going to be kicked off at the end of April with our High Tea South Boston event. It's going to be a month of offering different rewards for different sponsorship levels. Things like I have mugs, I have lighters, I have scars, I have a book. I'm in a book called Courage in Cannabis. We're offering tours of North Cambridge. I love politics. I live in North Cambridge, which is the home of the former Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. And
I'm assuming there's a website for this?
Not yet, but we will have all it up.
Okay.
We're putting this together. And season 4, I'm just going to be interviewing more amazing women. I'm hoping to do more speaking. I am an award-winning podcast. I was out in Reno last fall at the Women's Conference, and we won Best Podcast of the Year. I'm up for the podcast is up for another award with the NECAN this March. And just out there talking, meeting, actually being in person with the ladies I've been talking to online for so many years, and building this network so that we can change the world.
There you go. We very much just a little, a little thing you're working on, right?
In my daughter's bedroom, in between.
Exactly. Well, Joyce, we very much appreciate your time today. We're excited to hear about what you're working on, and hopefully you'll share with us so that we can share with our audience the website once it's live, and you can share with us the date. What's the date of the kickoff?
So April 30th, 2022, in South Boston from 3 to 5. It's going to be it's going to have great. We're going to have little baggies. We're trying to get connected to dispensaries who want to support us and try help our women coming to learn about their products. Again, this is a lot about marketing, and it'll be for the month of May, which is Mother's Day. So anybody who wants to support mothers, this is another great opportunity to connect with the podcast and just keep spreading the message, because we're crushing that stigma, one can a story at a time.
Great, we appreciate that. Again, we'll get that website from you, and we'll add it to the notes when it's available. And we look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.